I, Vidushi Sharma, student of MA Political Science, Lovely Professional University, would like to welcome you all to this special episode of podcast Coffee with Diplomat series. Today, we are truly honored to be in conversation with Ambassador Gurjit Singh Sir. Ambassador Singh is a distinguished former Indian diplomat who has served India across multiple continents in Asia, Africa, and Europe. Over the course of his career, he has held key positions including servicing as India's ambassador to Germany, Indonesia, Ethiopia, and as India's representative to African Union. He is not only a seasoned practitioner of diplomacy, but also a thoughtful scholar of international relations, having authored several important works on India-Africa relations, the Indo-Pacific, and the Indo-German partnership. His writings and lectures continue to guide students, researchers, and policymakers who are trying to make sense of increasingly complex world. In today's conversation, we will explore geopolitics through his experience and insight, moving from Africa to ASEAN, Europe to Indo-Pacific, and ultimately towards the future of India's role in changing global order. Ambassador Singh Sir, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Vidushi. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Thank you. We true are. So, sir, my very first question to you is that you have been positioned in several different geopolitical theaters, and specifically the Indo-Pacific, Africa, and Europe. How have these varied environments informed your epistemological approach to diplomacy? Did local political culture shape your strategic assessment framework over time?
It does, in fact. So, one of the reasons why in foreign service we post people out after 3 years is so that they don't become stale.
Yes.
And they learn to do new things with their experience. And normally we rotate them between developed and developing countries. So I've also had that rotation. So working in each country has a different culture and a different culture of working. You have to understand that system and how to have outreach. Developed countries are more bureaucratic.
Yes.
For instance, to reach the Prime Minister is not an easy task. It take you time. Whereas in developing countries, informal channels work much more. So if you are effective, you can reach the heads of government or ministers more easily. So that is the cultural difference. And therefore, you can achieve more in a top-down approach in a developing country, whereas in a developed country, you have to invest time and energy into a bottom-up approach, by starting with the bureaucracy, then going up, hoping something would come of it.
Okay, sir. And sir, India's Africa policy is often interpreted through debates on South-South cooperation versus strategic hedging. And from your experience of African Union, how do you conceptualize India's developmental statecraft in Africa, particularly in contrast to China's infrastructural statecraft and Europe's norm-based engagement?
So, in 2006, 4 years after the African Union was born, they said that they have some summits with Japan, EU, and China. But they said we want it with more partners. And the first partner they chose was India. I was the ambassador to the African Union at that time. It was a very proud moment. So we had the first India-Africa summit in 2008. Now, why they chose us is one, because they were hedging their bets among other partners and they wanted more capital, which Indian companies were providing, more development cooperation, which India was ready to provide, and more soft loans, which now India was ready to do since the IDEA scheme was born in 2003. So the kind of thing that India was ready to do in Africa came at the time when Africa was ready to receive them. So when they created the India-Africa Summit, it had a 3-tiered structure.
Yes.
There was the bilateral structure which continued, but Africa has got many regional economic communities. So those became part of the summit structure and India's engagement. And finally, there was the African Union level, at which we did pan-African ideas, how to push them forward, take them forward, have joint discussions, leading to the point that in 2023, India championed the entry of the African Union into the G20 as a permanent member.
Okay, sir. And sir, the Indo-Pacific has moved a geographic idea to geopolitical ordering framework. So, based on your ASEAN experience, how do you see India's role in shaping Indo-Pacific governance norms, particularly regarding maritime multilateralism and unilateralism balancing?
Thank you. So, from the time that India launched this economic liberalization in 1991, India then also launched a Look East policy to look at the economic successes of Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and see how they can relate to the expanding Indian economy. This Look East policy in 2014 became the Act East policy. In between, we were realizing that the Asia Pacific concept is largely an economic concept and it does not include India because the biggest organization was the APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and they stopped in Myanmar. Even ASEAN stopped in Myanmar. It is only ASEAN when they included India as a summit partner and then included us in the East Asia Summit in 2005 as a charter member that the concept widened. But when China started invading the maritime resources of many ASEAN countries and threatening the East China Sea with Japan, this strategic issues came to the fore rather than the economic issues of the APEC. So once Asia Pacific became more strategic, India had a bigger role. Please remember that when the tsunami came in 2004, India was the first responder and everybody suddenly realized that what a force of good India could be.
Yes,
so in a strategic sense, India became much more important, leading to the Indo-Pacific construct, which is less economic and more strategic and basically comes from Japan and India, looking at two ends of the ocean and saying we will try and maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific in between, because you have the challenge of China, you have the challenge of indifferent American attitudes, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, and Australia is playing a role. But ASEAN is very important, but ASEAN is not a strategic concept, it's a functional concept. So the strategic conception of Indo-Pacific is provided by India and Japan, and now others are coming in. The Americans are there, French are there, Germans, EU, Australia, everybody is there. But I think the biggest votaries are India and Japan, because for us this ocean and the South China Sea is extremely important to be kept open. Interestingly, it is India, Japan and France, three countries, whose concept of the Indo-Pacific extends to the eastern and southern shores of Africa. Other countries don't look at that.
Yes, sir.
So that gives India a central position in the Indo-Pacific.
Yes, sir.
And that is why it gives us a rise of stature and a rise of responsibility.
Okay, sir. And sir, ASEAN centrality is frequently discussed but rarely unpacked. How do you interpret ASEAN's centrality in practice, especially when member states respond asymmetrically to China's economic and security pressures?
So ASEAN originally was formed by 5 countries in 1967 when the Vietnam War was coming to an end. And they were actually afraid that communism will take them over. So they wanted to build a bulwark without openly supporting the United States. But the security umbrella of original ASEAN was American, without saying so. But ASEAN was an economic and social construct.
Okay, sir.
Then ASEAN continued and slowly started having dialogue partners, and that is how India came in. So they had dialogue partners, Japan, China, Korea, India, Australia and New Zealand, and later Russia, United States, Canada, EU and others. Now, the structure that ASEAN built, one was the ASEAN Regional Forum in 1994, which was meant to discuss all security issues in the region and provide a discussion ground for them. Then they had 2 years later the ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting, which later included dialogue partners. And then they had the East Asia Summit. And then they had the extended ASEAN Maritime Forum with other members. So there are several structures like this. So these are called the ASEAN central bodies. ASEAN at the core, partners around, hoping to create the ambience of peace and security in the region.
Yes.
But in 2012, the Chinese chunked all this and said all the 9-line belongs to us,
Yes.
and started occupying reefs, shores, waters of the 5 ASEAN countries who are involved in this concept and taking them over, creating a crisis. Now ASEAN found that being a non-strategic body, it could not deal with strategic challenges. And the ASEAN countries by themselves, one by one, were not strong enough to deal with China. So they had to externalize a security balance. And that is where India, United States, Australia and Japan acquired a different dimension. And that is why the Quad came into being. Not because ASEAN wanted it, but the region needed it.
And sir, India's development partnerships are often analyzed through the lens of post-colonial solidarity. And how do you respond to the scholarly critique that argues that India must move from symbolic solidarity to systematic institution building to remain geopolitically credible?
I agree with that. I think in my lecture to your colleagues today, I did explain how India started with sporadic ideas and later institutionalized them into the ITEC program and the ICCR scholarship scheme. These were later then converted with economic content into IDEA scheme. So we have been domestically institutionalizing cooperation with countries of the South on a very open basis. We have the India ASEAN Fund, we have India Africa funds, we have contributed to the Pacific Rim countries, the Pacific Islands to help them. So we have done many such things. So there is an institutionalization. What is perhaps missing is consistent follow-up. Now the question is, do we join other bodies? So in some cases we do not have enough reach in the South. So we have used the United Nations, UN, South-South cooperation, given them some money. They have gone to countries where India did not have embassies and implemented projects using Indian models. So I think that has been effective. But if you mean by institutionalizing that now do we need larger bodies since the multipolarity is failing? Can we create larger bodies? I think there was an effort, the BRICS Bank, New Development Bank, the AIIB, there were efforts, but they have become China dominated. So whereas one hand we fight domination by G7, we also had to fight domination by China. So I think it's time to create a impact fund of the developing countries led by India, South Africa, Indonesia and Brazil, where we'll all put in some money and put money into those projects which will achieve the SDGs, that is the impact on the ground, and do small projects, but make them effective for the people and not large infrastructure projects which let others do.
Okay, sir. And sir, what do you think is the role of India in South-South cooperation?
I think India is now the lead player. No other South-South country, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, they all have programs of cooperation. But none of them are as vast or as institutionalized as Indian programs. So we should work together. And we should also work with the global South, the global North through the G7 in what I call trilateral cooperation. And see which program works best and then fund it. So I think many of the G7 countries through trilateral cooperation with India are quite ready to do this. The Japanese are doing it in the private sector, the Germans are doing it through GIZ, small projects in African countries, and now France and the EU and the UK are also looking, some of them at impact funding, how to achieve the SDGs. But because countries are involved and financing institutions, very often to put together a system where your rules and regulations and procedures can match is a very big challenge, and that is what we are now dealing with.
Okay, sir. And sir, I'm very keen to know that, could you please tell us a little about how do you first ended in the Indian Foreign Services and what drew you towards the diplomacy as your career?
When I was in college, I used to read a lot of things about foreign policy
Okay.
in newspaper. That is, we only had newspapers, but newspapers had very good columns, very reputed people on foreign policy. So I used to read a lot of them, so I was very interested in that. Then after my bachelor's in political science, I joined a master's program in international relations.
Okay.
And that set my mind clearly on the path to the foreign service. But to join the foreign service, one had to appear for the UPSC exam and then succeed. In my days, unless you came in the top few, you would not get that option. So I was lucky that I came in the top few and I got that option.
Yes.
So I became a diplomat at the age of 23, which I was very young. I never worked anywhere. So I'm quite useless to work anywhere else. I'm used to being a diplomat.
Okay, sir. And sir, you have served in so many countries. Is there any position that you remember with particularly to fondness, or either because of the people or the culture or the challenges that you faced there?
So each country is different.
Okay.
I was in Japan. Fortunately, I was trained in Japanese, so I could understand them a little more.
Okay.
But dealing with them is very difficult unless you know them. From there, I went to Sri Lanka during the period of the Indian peacekeeping forces, the LTT and JVP both attacking us. It was like working in a war zone. Sri Lankan people are very wonderful, but the situation was not. So, different atmosphere. I went back to Japan after Indian liberalization. Now, when I went the first time to Japan, India was the land of wonder, Taj Mahal and Buddhism. Now, India was the land of opportunity for business, so that became very important. Then I had two postings in Africa, in Kenya and Ethiopia.
Yes.
Those were amazing postings because there, the inroads Indian teachers and education has made, people are beholden to you. They would stop you on the road and say, Salam Babuji. So that is what the teachers had taught them. And similarly, when I went to Italy and Germany, they were far more bureaucratic in their work. So the achievements are slower, but when done, are more lasting. So therefore, you learn the cultural nuances of doing diplomacy with each country. And that is the challenge a diplomat really faces.
Yes, sir, truly. And so you have spent a lot of time with us here at LPU for now being. And what was your first impression when you came to LPU campus? And in terms of scale of environment and energy, how would you rate it?
I was very impressed. It was overwhelming. I never realized you have 40,000 students and such a big campus that you won't fit into one city and you are at the junction of 3 districts. So it's quite overwhelming. But to be honest, the first word, lovely, from my childhood meant a laddu. So the first thing almost I did yesterday was go and look for a lovely laddu. And I had that. And then I was very satisfied. I said, now I am at home.
So true, sir. And so based on your experience here, and are there any suggestion you would like to share either for LPU as an institution or for our students to better prepare for career in diplomacy, policy, or in global affairs?
So, nowadays diplomacy only does not mean joining the foreign service through the UPSC. You can also look at international organizations. There are many global think tanks and there are many independent organizations which work for development. So I think the most satisfying job of a diplomat in my case was the development aspect. What I could do for development and learn and implement, that has been the most abiding memory of mine from it. Therefore, I would say look at international developmental diplomacy, and then there are many opportunities besides the foreign service. Use them. I don't know now exactly how many things your university prepares you for, but basically looking at globalization, looking at global south, looking at trade diplomacy, looking at developmental diplomacy. I think some specialization in this, courses on this, if they are not already there, could be introduced, and that will hold you in good stead.
So thank you so much, sir, for your precious time. It was really great having you here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Have a good day.
Thank you, Vidushi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.